So it might appear that we did this a little bit back asswards. And yeah, we kind of did. But I got a lift and I'm gonna use it. But if I didn't have the help of my good friend Michael, this would have been a lot more difficult by myself.
I didn't do anything.
I know you guys haven't seen this car in quite a bit, and for those of you that might be new to the channel, you might be thinking, what even is this car? We'll touch on that in a second. But right now, we need to remount this subframe so we can at least make this thing a rolling chassis. So it needs to be pushed more back. So I think once we get it to a certain height, Mike, then you and I can manipulate the joints to then get it up on the studs.
And what should I do?
Go look pretty. So just stand there.
I want to manipulate joints.
So all we got to do is just manipulate it onto the studs. So I'm going to keep jacking this up. Oh, this thing looks like it's a little bit behind.
Can I get a good size?
Aww. So the engine's out, the subframe's back in, connected the steering shaft so we can pull the sucker out of the garage. And as I'm just peeping around the engine, I noticed something on the transmission. You take a look where I've so neatly organized all of the parts from the car. The bell housing has some huge holes. One here and then one right about there that look about the size for a pen or pencil to fit through. So if we take a look at the clutch, I'm just looking and what do we have here? We have some marks all along the pressure plate. Don't mind this is just my socket for removing it. But as I'm examining, I noticed that one of these pins that holds the pressure plate or aligns the pressure plate on is missing. Right about here. So what I'm thinking is it popped out as this was spinning, got shot up into the bell housing, and caused that damage. We can coin it to installer error. Shame on the people that installed it all those years ago. But for a preliminary walkthrough of everything disassembled, the car's in kind of rough shape. The engine has seen better days. This is a crate LS3 from Summit Racing. Purchased it back in, summer of 2017 as a replacement for the LS1 that came in this 240. So we had an LS3 T56 combo that made about 420 wheel and 400 torque. So wasn't all that much, but it definitely pushed the car pretty well. And why are we here taking it all apart? Well, if you guys remember how I competed in this car in the 2019 Midwest Drift Union Pro-Am, I had an unfortunate run-in with the wall. And ever since then, I wanted to get this thing tube reared. More on that in a sec, but let's go ahead and get this engine up on the stand.
When we got shows in it, keep the money pile. On the east side, all the shit is getting wild. Thinking about my baby doll, she way too mad at y'all. Think you should roll with me, got me feeling so dizzy. So different, finally working out. I wanna switch sides, seeing how I'm feeling now. On my way to cars and clothes, traveling on the road. I'm getting close anyway, you see my growth in it. I feel like I'm the bad guy.
That's always more painful than it seems. Whew. So after that faithful September day in 2019, when I stuffed the rear end into a wall, it's just been a gradual decline for this car. You might remember that I dropped it off at Bell Raceworks maybe, end of 2020 to get the tubed rear structure built. And yes, that was roughly the last time that I saw the car. Due to my own negligence, I just let it sit at AJ's shop and it endured the elements of time because of it. Unfortunately, water was able to get inside the car, caused some minor rust spots, surface rust, albeit, but that's okay because we're gonna completely revamp this car. We're not abandoning it. Many of you thought that I had sold it because you just didn't see it around. No, it's not the case. It's here in all of its turd glory. But here, go ahead and take a look at what AJ was able to craft together. We have a sick tube rear structure with replaceable bars in case we have another encounter with the wall. You might be thinking it looks a little bare. Where's the quarter panels? They're actually sitting right up underneath my porch. Those are the LFC panels made by 2F Performance. that pretty much replace all of the OEM metal. You rivet them on or riv nut them on. It all meets on the back. AJ welded in a little plate for me to connect them to, and you have a faux rear end. This is going to require me to run some separate fuel lines outside of the stock ones underneath the car. And really, because there's so much work involved with where the car's currently at, I decided to pull the engine because it sat with coolant, distilled water really, for the time that it sat, and you can tell that the water started to rust a little bit. Take a look at the coolant outlet here. You see all that rust starting to form. So I don't know if that necessitates us to pull the head and then try our best to clean out the coolant passages, or if we take it to a machine shop to do that. But you can see the 240's a piece, and it's a little nerve-wracking knowing how much work is going to need to be put into it to get it back up to its previous state. But I'm really just trying to up my game a bit ever since we got the FRS done. For years, I always drifted the crappy, ugly-looking cars. Heck, I even showed up to Pro-Am with this thing half painted. That's not gonna be me anymore, and I expect you guys to hold me to it. I think I'm gonna keep the radiator in the OEM location. No need to move it to the back now. Really not trying to go crazy with this, but with how it's currently sitting, it needs a lot of work. So the plan is to So the plan is to ditch the Wiring Specialties harness and stock LS ECU in favor of the Holley Performance harness with the Terminator X little tuner. I think it would be dumb for me to do anything else, considering the simpleness and the form factor of it all. That way it will allow me to not have to use HP tuners. Granted, the HP tuners stuff works and it's just fine, but I've ran so many gauges and I have so many bits and pieces of wiring in the engine bay to run a fuel pressure sensor, oil temp sensor, oil pressure sensor, that if I just eliminate it all and go with something from Holley, I can get it all on their little tablet. Pretty much clean up a lot of the excess wiring that once existed in this car. You don't even want to see what this thing looks like up underneath the dash. It is a complete rat's nest, since I had to run separate power and ground wires for everything. I think you could see it better on the other side there. Yeah, look at this. All of that gauge wiring, power distribution ran, my kill switch. It's a mess. And hopefully, well, not hopefully, because I know Holley is going to be able to fix that. Removed the fuel cell and our battery. I think it's pretty cool how Bell Raceworks put his own logo there. Good product placement, right? The other day, my friend Mike and I were able to pull out the dash and all of the wiring. When we laid everything all out, it looked like a big ball of spaghetti. So it's a refreshing sight to see this car stripped down completely. I already started removing all of this sound deadening. You can see where it was, where I guess the previous owner decided to not remove it and just paint it white over it. And then you can see all of the booger welds all throughout the floor pan, I guess whenever the seam sealer was removed. Not to mention the interior is riddled with self-tapping screws. Like right here, look, self-tapper poking right up for where a bracket holding up the brake line for the dual caliper. How convenient, right? Now before we remove the hydraulic handbrake, I want to go ahead and suck all the fluid out. Don't want this to leak everywhere, although it really doesn't matter since we are repainting the interior. Sucky, sucky. This reminds me of that tool that the dentists use to suck out your saliva when their hands shoved down your throat. All right. Now that the handbrake's out though, let me show you something that was a failure waiting to happen. If you look right up underneath the car where the hydraulic handbrake line comes out into that self-tapper that is held up right where the rear seat would be located if the interior were still in, forward of it, you will see that this line was being chewed through. Chewed through by what, you might ask? Good old drive shaft when this thing was running. So I'll need to order a new one of these lines. But could you imagine entering on a wall on a banked course, expecting your hydro to work, only for it to not work at all and end up crumpling the rear of your car? I mean, I guess there's something to be said about entering on the bank with the handbrake to begin with, but you never know what you need to do mid-tandem. And that's just one of the many reasons why I wanted to strip this car down completely and redo it all. Because who knows how many little things could have failed because I didn't have my hands on it. Or if I'm that shitty of a mechanic, I put my hands on it and then it fails. Either way, it's good to give this car a complete once over. But because I work a 9 to 5 and can only scrounge up the time to work on this car from 6 to midnight or so, I'll have to check in with you guys in another day. And we're back on a Thursday evening. I got my boy Michael here. He just got hired as a design engineer at the same company I work, so we're probably gonna get fired super quick. Isn't that right, Mike? But since he's a design engineer, I wanted to see what he could come up with for holding my external reservoirs on the frame, since they're just kind of dangling right now. Before I chopped off the whole rear end, I had just crappily mounted them with an angle iron bracket and some self-tappers, so I'm not trying to do that. But since Michael has a 3D printer, we're gonna utilize that and see what he can come up with. So tell me, what did you make? Or what have you designed?
I didn't design anything.
I'm thought of a design that kind of is reminiscent of your connecting rod caps on your pistons. So it's gonna kind of be like this. So just figure your connecting rod cap on one end and then mirror the same thing and then rotate that 90 degrees. So it's going to grab onto the cage and then it'll rotate 90 degrees. That way it holds this. Well, actually, it'll rotate 90 degrees so it holds it like so. I don't know. Which side do you want to go for?
I don't think it matters.
Either or. It's a prototype. It's a 3D printer.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be the final design.
But yeah, it can be like that. We can rotate it. We'll figure it out.
So see, that's something that I wouldn't have been able to do on my own. So thank you for taking the initiative and buying a 3D printer for me to use.
Huh?
So I had to run in and grab Mike's first design for me, a little cover for my arc switch panel relays. Did it all himself after he took some measurements. That's a good job, Mike.
Box extrude.
The whole idea behind this, just to give it some extra protection from the elements that the car will see in the interior. If I'm driving or drifting in the rain, or if it's super dusty, at least we isolate the relays, keep them high and dry.
I guess. It's not really that good though. It's garbage. Who designed this?
I know I will be going back to Mike to see if he can make me some fuel line clips. What, you don't want to do it now?
I'm not doing it.
So because we're running the fuel cell and I plan on using 8 AN fuel lines, I figured if he could create some little brackets that would hold those fuel lines all the way down the frame rail, then that would be the perfect use of his 3D printer.
Yeah, I'm sure it would, bud. I'm just thinking of another idea. That way, so we do that. It might be, it'll probably be sturdy enough. We don't need to over-engineer it.
Yeah, well, guess what? When you get it done, we're gonna put it on video again, and we'll see how you did.
It doesn't fit.
And with that said, I think that's gonna be it for this one. You know, this is pretty much stage 1 here, stripping it all down. And I couldn't have done it with the good old friend Mike. All right, we'll see you guys next time.
On the east side, all the shit is getting wild.